evening, everybody. Welcome to another live episode of The Breakdown. It is October of the 1st, 2023. We have a lot to talk about tonight. I'm your host, Nate Pike, and it's been a week, and it's going to be another week, and then there will be more weeks, which is good because the weeks just keep on coming. But we got a lot to talk about tonight. We're going to start off with, yesterday was the September 30th, the day for National Day for Truth and Reconciliation in Canada. And so we thought maybe this episode we might start off with just a little bit of truth. Maybe we would swing a little bit hard into that, because as much as politicians and Canadians across the board, Albertans as well, have been patting themselves on the back going, it's National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Look, I'm posing for pictures. This must mean the problem's over. Problem's far from over. And we saw a few news stories highlight that just in Alberta very, very clearly this week. That's part of what we're going to be talking about. To kick things off, we're going to talk about a complaint that was filed against Alberta Health Services by a Siksika man because of the death of his wife. Now, this turns into a much bigger and broader conversation, but from the story, the complaint filed by Benedict Crowchief of Siksika Nation says his wife, Myra Crowchief, died in April 2022 because staff and doctors at the Strathmore District Health Services Hospital failed to disclose to them that she had active abdominal bleeding. The complaint alleges doctors knew about her condition, but she was not given medication to manage her pain and was ignored by nurses. Now, it would be very, very easy to look at this and go, this is a tragic one-off. But the reality is, it's far from that. Not only is it far from the first time that an Indigenous or First Nations person has experienced prejudice, allegedly. I mean, really, do we have to say allegedly at this point? But it's not the first time that an Indigenous or First Nations or Métis person has experienced prejudice or discrimination at the hands of the healthcare system. And in fact, you don't have to go back very far at all, because it wasn't very long ago that it was back in 2022 that Siksika actually reached out and said to their community, hey, we've been hearing all kinds of horrifying stories about how you're experiencing the healthcare system. We want to try to address this. We want to know more. And they put out a call for Nation members to talk about how they had experienced racism while trying to access the healthcare system. Now, again, that was a thing that a lot of people went, I don't know about that. But the reality is that there is a very well-established bias that exists in the healthcare system. There was a study that was done in 2020. It was originally sent out. The results of the study were publicized in March of this year, and it found that 2/3 of Alberta physicians surveyed have implicit anti-Indigenous bias. The survey was sent to every practicing physician in the province in 2020. Now, this isn't, for anybody who has been paying attention to this issue, this isn't news. This isn't shocking. What's shocking is the fact that it's still an issue in 2023. In part of the statement that was released, it was made very, very clear by Benedict Crowchief that this is a well-known problem that exists for people from that nation who are trying to access healthcare. And in fact, they said that it's not uncommon that members of Siksika First Nation will they'll bypass certain healthcare facilities in order to get to the bigger ones in Calgary, where they have a better chance at being treated fairly and objectively. This is a huge, huge problem, and it's a conversation that, unfortunately, with everybody glad-handing around truth and reconciliation, didn't get the traction that it probably should have. But it's not the only one, by any stretch of the imagination, that didn't get as much traction as it probably should have. For anybody who's been following the show for any length of time, we've been talking about the Curl leak up in northern Alberta for quite some time. Now, this was a leak where originally the powers that be said, "Oh no, that's just a little spill. We don't have to worry about it. It's not going to affect animals. It's not going to affect groundwater." And then some of the people who were concerned about being affected, who were Indigenous and First Nations, went and took pictures. And they were able to clearly establish that there was a very, very real risk that, in fact, there was exposure to the wildlife population and there was exposure to groundwater. Well, the AER earlier released a statement where they said, we didn't do anything wrong. Turns out, not good enough by a long stretch for the people involved. The AFCN, the Athabasca Chippewa First Nations released this statement where they didn't pull any punches. After standing by as Exxon Imperial dumped millions of liters of contaminated fluid into the Peace Athabasca watershed, the AER has released the results of its investigation into the incident. Unsurprisingly, the AER has absolved itself of any responsibility for failing to prevent or communicate the incident to downstream communities. We have no confidence in the AER or the government of Alberta to investigate this incident or to prevent another one from happening. And then they actually go and they call on the federal government to step in and do some very specific things in order to try to prevent. They want a full geological audit of tailings facilities in the oil sands. They don't believe that Curl was an isolated incident. They want to make sure there are no other incidents. They want a longitudinal health study of the residents of the Peace Athabasca Delta to determine whether or not there are any and the severity of any health impacts from industrial activity. And they want the federal government to basically remake how the monitoring and enforcement is done, because they have, as they very clearly stated, no faith whatsoever, no confidence in the AER or the government of Alberta to investigate this incident. That's just the reality. This was another story that came out. This was released on September 27th. This was 3 days before National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. But that's not the worst of it. This is another story that came up earlier in the week. And this is hard because there was a young kid who got swarmed in Cochrane and was, I'm just going to read from the statement that was released. So there's an organization called the Reconciliation Action Group. The mother of this kid, who's Métis, was part of the group. And the mother apparently and the group very strongly believe, based on this statement, that not only was this violent assault allowed to happen, but it happened specifically because the mother has been involved in anti-racism and in reconciliation efforts, and because the kid is Métis. So from the statement, the victim was swarmed by a mob of 10 to 13 teenage males ranging from 15 to 17 years of age, nearly causing his death. The violent males beat the child, placed him in a chokehold until he was unable to breathe, used a broken stick as a weapon, and at one point turned him upside down while beating him. One of the attackers declared during the attack, while attempting to choke the victim, "Does that feel good? I know I feel good." This was the level of bold, calculated violence perpetrated on this victim. And here's where it gets even worse, if you can imagine such a thing. This was all witnessed by the school's vice principal, who refused to intervene, refused to call police, refused to render medical aid or call EMS, and refused to perform her duty as a steward of the school. And that's from the statement that was released by like I said, the Reconciliation Action Group. And there's a lot of people who, upon hearing that, would go, "Oh, I don't know about that. That seems like it's a little extreme." But the reality is, assaults like that happen all the time. They are part of what built this country. You can't have, as many people have said, reconciliation without truth. And the truth is, this goes on in our country, in our province, all the time. And until we collectively step up to make sure that this doesn't happen anymore, it's going to keep happening. And we'll have failed in our responsibilities. We'll have failed at reconciliation. We'll have failed at truth. But perhaps what's really telling about this whole situation is how little attention it has gotten, particularly when one of the biggest political movements that's going on in the province of Alberta right now and across the country is a whole thing about, oh, we got to protect the kids, leave our kids alone. Well, according to the statement from the Reconciliation Action Group, this kid was beaten within an inch of his life. We haven't seen any statements from Freedom Calgary. We haven't seen any statements from the Take Back Alberta. We haven't seen any statements from Mahmoud. None of those people have said, this is a very, very bad thing that has happened. It's unacceptable. And the fact that there is resounding silence from so many people refusing to condemn it, refusing to demand a complete and thorough investigation with consequences if appropriate, that in and of itself speaks to how much work we have yet to do. Moving on from there. A little bit of a minor development in the Stampede lawsuit. So for anybody who has been following the story, the Calgary Stampede has settled. The settlement was approved this week. They've settled a lawsuit. It's a class action lawsuit that's been brought forward by people who were victimized, over 70, who were the victims of a sexual predator who was given full run of the young Canadians. It's been demonstrated as well through publicly released documents affiliated with this lawsuit that the Stampede knew that this individual, who was later criminally charged, they knew that he had problems. They knew that there were stories about him abusing kids under his care. And they chose to turn a blind eye. And in fact, there's the story that's been well established as well, where one of the victims actually tried to raise the alarm on this whole situation. And the response from the powers that be, the response from the authorities within the Stampede that he went to, allegedly said, well, but do you like being a part of the young Canadians? Because you go talking like this, and that's just not gonna. It's probably not gonna work. So maybe you don't talk like this. Maybe this is something that just goes away. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but that's the kind of leverage that was put towards this kid who tried to raise the alarm. Now, this abuse went on for literally decades, and this has turned into a political issue because the Stampede does receive funding from pretty much all levels of government. They're the beneficiaries in many ways of the new arena deal that is being organized by the province and by the city. And the question has been asked to all levels of government, are you going to continue funding the Stampede? Are you going to continue just giving the money? Because the reality is the settlement amount hasn't been determined yet. There's going to be a 2-day mediation that's set for December 14th and 15th, and it's going to determine what the dollar amount will be. But to be clear, the Calgary Stampede has accepted liability. They've accepted the responsibility. They've accepted negligence. They've accepted it's their fault. That's where it is. And because of this settlement agreement, which the Stampede absolutely should be responsible for, there's a very strong argument to be made that taxpayers are going to be, in effect, subsidizing this settlement. Because the Stampede is going to continue, as Danielle Smith was very clear, the Stampede is going to continue to receive the major amounts of money because, in Danielle Smith's words, it's the premier festival in the province of Alberta. The kicker is there will be no punitive damages. So there will be a settlement amount. How much that'll be, we'll wait to see if it's disclosed. But at the end of the day, the Stampede is going to continue making the tremendous amounts of money that they do. And they're going to be able to effectively skate while still bringing in taxpayer dollars. And it's worth noting that in multiple news stories that have talked about this, survivors of this predator have been very, very clear they're not happy with how this situation is played out. Moving on from there and switching gears a little bit, we're going to talk about the renewables moratorium. So Danielle Smith and her big moratorium on renewables, because some people don't like the look of those solar panels and those wind turbines. They're just unsightly, and when they're at their end of life, somebody has to take them away. They don't leach into the ground or anything, but we got to get that dealt with. So we're just going to shut down the entire industry for 7 months. Well, it turns out there was a recent survey that was completed, some polling that was done, and nearly 2/3 of Albertans oppose the government's pause on renewable energy approvals. 2/3 of Albertans are against this policy that was brought forward by Danielle Smith, which she, again, has been unable to demonstrate why. When the policy was first launched, she said, "Oh, you know what? It was because the AER they asked for it, and then they said no, we didn't do that." And then there was another group that she tried to say, "Oh, they asked for it," and they said, "No, we didn't do that." And then she tried to say, "Well, the rural municipalities of Alberta, they wanted it." And the RMA, the president of the RMA, in multiple places on record said, "No, we'll work with it because we do have some concerns, because we don't want people turning their property into wind farms without our approval." But we didn't ask for the moratorium. Danielle Smith still hasn't been able to say why this moratorium happened, other than, well, it just did. So the poll released Thursday suggests nearly 2/3 of Albertans oppose the provincial government's moratorium on approvals for new renewable energy projects. This is from the story on the screen. This poll clearly demonstrates that a strong majority of Alberta residents do not support the Alberta government's ill-conceived ban on new renewable energy products, said Angela McIntyre, director of the Calgary Climate Hub, which commissioned the poll from Leger. So it's Leger. This isn't just some hack poll done in the basement of some sort of political organization. This is a poll that was commissioned with using a credible, renowned polling organization, and nobody likes it. 2/3 oppose it. It's not just that 2/3 don't agree with it. 2/3 oppose it. But Smith has been doing a lot of talking about energy lately. She just launched not one, but two major campaigns. She launched one on the pensions, which is an unmitigated disaster, but she's also launched one in regards to energy. And she's going to war with the feds on that one too. They've launched this massive program across the country where they've even got a van that has movie screens on the side, a la Rebel News style. Apparently, it's not the Rebel News van. We asked, we got an answer. But they are driving this van. Nobody wants to freeze in the dark. Come on, Ottawa. We're driving a van around to tell you that nobody wants to freeze in the dark. But this is where it gets to a little bit of the Smith show. Because on September 28th, Smith appeared on Power and Politics to pump up the campaign, to tell the feds about clean energy. Your program for clean energy in the net zero power grid, it's totally unacceptable. We can't do 2035. That's madness, even though it's been reported that it's entirely possible to do it. And even though the same things that Smith is predicating the 2050 on rely on technology that hasn't been developed either. So guess that knife cuts both ways. But one of the questions that came up had to do with the statement that Smith made about the potential penalties for corporations that don't follow the rules.
Who wants to bring on new power looking at natural gas. It'll have to be 100% almost abated by 2035. Otherwise, people will end up going to jail. And we just want people to understand it's not realistic, not achievable, not constitutional, and it will not result in reliability and affordability. Everyone needs to be concerned about this.
What do you mean people will go to jail if the electricity grid isn't clean by 2035? You think the federal government's going to slap handcuffs on your energy operators?
Yeah, that's what they've said. They've said that it's a criminal code violation. in 2035 if you have unabated natural gas and you haven't been able to abate 95% of your emissions. The problem is the technology isn't available to be able to have that level of sequestration yet. And so company CEOs are now making the decision, do we invest today knowing that in January of 2035, our CEO is going to be imprisoned? For 3 years is the actual terms, because they're using their criminal law power to try to invade our provincial jurisdiction and our right to be able to create our own electricity grid. It's serious. And that's why we have seen that there is a lot of hesitation to invest in baseload power. And we need to make sure people understand the consequences of that.
Okay. I appreciate the challenge, and we'll reach out to the federal government to ask them about your concerns about incarceration over emissions.
Now, you got to give props to the host of Power and Politics there, because he managed to get through that whole statement where he said, well, about your claim about CEOs being jailed for emissions. And it's been debated. There have been some people who have conflated natural gas power with coal powered plants. There's been conversations around that. But before we move on to the rebuttal, because CBC did fact check her, it's time to play everybody's favorite clip. Because clearly Danielle Smith was told these things, and clearly she decided to go on not just like one of the little podcasts. She went on national television and she held this up. So let's just play everybody's favorite clip.
BS detector evolved over time?
I tend to be pretty trusting.
I will never get tired of that. I will never get tired of that. What did CBC have to say when they did the fact checking? Are they going to be arresting CEOs and putting them in jail? There's probably a lot of people who would like to see a little bit more of that happen. But what did CBC find out?
We reached out to the Office of the Minister of Environment and Climate Change about the Premier's claim about threats of incarceration. And Stephen Guilbeault says this: I keep seeing critics falsely claim that we are banning all gas generation by 2035 upon threat of jail time. This fabrication is not designed to inform, it is designed to inflame.
Now, there have been some people who have made the argument, but that's Stephen Guilbeault. He's the one who's putting this policy forward. Of course, he would say that. But the problem is, if he's on the record as saying this absolutely won't happen on the public record, that's something that's definitely theoretically admissible in a court of law should anyone ever actually face criminal consequences for this sort of thing. So it's really important to realize that that's not going to happen. Very, very rarely when corporations find themselves on the wrong side of the law, do they see CEOs getting jail time. More often than not, they'll get fines. And more often than not, the possibility of those fines is calculated into some of these larger corporations' business plans. So the notion that Smith is putting forward is, again, patently false. And according to what Stephen Guilbeault said there and what Power and Politics said, I can say this yet again with full confidence that I'm not misrepresenting the situation. Danielle Smith lies a lot. She does. It happens a lot. Moving on from there, we get into one of the big news stories that's been going around in regards to a school board trustee. And we're talking about Monique Lagrange. Now, this is a whole thing because this has been going on since the beginning of September. And it has been dragging on in between organizations. So we're going to do a quick little recap and then just sort of summarize where we are so far. So the Coles notes is at this point in time, the Red Deer Catholic School Board trustee, Monique Lagrange, won't be fired yet. Monique Lagrange is, of course, the school board trustee who posted the meme, I guess we can call it, where she had a picture. It was two pictures, and the picture on the top was a bunch of kids leaning out of a window, waving Nazi flags, waving swastika flags, and the picture on the bottom is a bunch of kids waving pride flags, the rainbow flag. And she shared this with the caption, "Indoctrination is indoctrination." And this touched off a whole great big firestorm. Now, as we've illustrated in previous episodes, Monique Lagrange has a fascinating little world view. She has a t-shirt company, and it's pretty. It makes some pretty bold claims. So the t-shirt company sells t-shirts that say, among other things, "Obsessed with Jesus." It's not just "I love Jesus." It's obsessed with Jesus. From their launch day post, "Today is the day we team up and partner with Jesus to use his word to change atmospheres throughout the world. I am designing custom t-shirts and apparel with the words from Jesus Christ on them. They are Holy Spirit inspired, prayed over, and a revelation from God. Grab yours today. Get obsessed with Jesus." You know, I've heard t-shirts called a lot of things. And for anybody who's been following the show for any length of time, you probably know I have an affinity for clever t-shirts. I enjoy me a good t-shirt. I have never, not once, thought that any given t-shirt was a revelation from God. And there's a certain amount of hubris, perhaps, that one has to wonder about when someone starts saying, "Hey, you should buy these t-shirts because Jesus wants you to." And by the way, in order for it to be a revelation from God, Jesus or God would have had to have told her that directly. And when you take a look at the history of people who claim that God speaks to them directly and provides them revelations directly, it doesn't usually go all that well. But that's Monique Lagrange. Now, there was some confusion initially because there were a lot of people who were like, she's got to be fired. She can't be a school board trustee if she's posting Nazi memes. That's not cool. And we talked about it when this story first came up. We were very, very clear. It's simple. If you're going to say Nazis, you'd better be talking about Nazis. Using anything less than Nazis to talk about Nazis diminishes the horrors of what the Nazis and Adolf Hitler did. To use that sort of rhetoric or imagery diminishes the horrors of all of the people who were the victims, direct and indirect, of the Nazi war machine. Just don't do it. It's pretty simple. A lot of people felt that way. A lot of people called for her resignation. And she did lose a position, but it wasn't the one everyone thought. So the Alberta Catholic School Trustees Association, which is not the Red Deer Catholic School Board, the Alberta Catholic School Trustees Association, which is the group that represents all of the Catholic school boards from across the province of Alberta, they all raised their hand and said, yeah, you know what? We don't want to be affiliated with this. Red Deer, if you want to send us a different trustee to represent you, that'd be great. But if you don't have a different trustee, then we don't want her because she doesn't represent what we're trying to do here. So she was fired, discharged, released, whatever term you want to use, out of the Alberta Catholic School Trustees Association, but she remains, and to this day, remains a school board trustee. Now, the Red Deer Catholic School Board did issue on September 20th, before we get to the Catholic School Board issuing on September 20th, Lagrange was also one of the keynote speakers at the million, maybe not a million, like a couple thousand probably across the country, person march for children, and we're against all of the gender things and the pride flag things, and we don't like any of that. She was a speaker at the rally in Red Deer, which isn't a great look for somebody who is being told, hey, maybe tone down what you're doing here, but she did it anyways. And she's received some consequences. She's not yet being fired or being stripped of the role, because one of the things that the Red Deer School Board, Catholic School Board, did was they said to the Minister of Education, Demetrius Nicolaides, and they said, "Hey, how do we get rid of her? Like, can you fire her, please?" And Demetrius Nicolaides came back and said, "Oh, that's up to you. You guys have the power to do that." And then they looked at their bylaws and went, "Oh crap, we don't have a bylaw for that." And so it looks like they've almost put down a series of things that Monique Lagrange has to do. And if she doesn't do them, then they can have that conversation again. So she's being censored from being part of any and all board committees and from attending and participating in board committee meetings. She does not represent. She's not to represent the board or school division in any official capacity, including to the media and at functions. So that includes graduations, that includes masses. She's not allowed to be recognized as the school board trustee until she does the things that she needs to do. Within 90 days, she has to take sensitive training on Holocaust, 2S LGBTQ+, use of social media, and human rights. At the end of the day, 90 days, she has to issue a sincere letter of apology. And she also has to not post any content of similar nature to the original meme. They've been very clear. Failure to do any of these things will potentially result in another code of conduct complaint. But of course, once, I guess, God's given you a direct revelation that you should compare children to Nazis, tolerant children to intolerant Nazis, I guess you don't back down on that. She's went and got herself a lawyer. Lawyer James Kitchen. He told Post Media that Lagrange can't apologize. She can't be done. She can't issue the letter of apology in good conscience. And that calls into question any usefulness of sensitivity training. Lagrange doesn't feel like she did anything wrong. She has no regret. She doesn't want to be trained on how to be more sensitive. She doesn't want to learn the error of her ways because she doesn't believe, it appears, according to the statements, that she made any error. Kitchen went on to say either the board's going to kick her out or she's going to fight it legally and hopefully be able to stay in there while she has the fight. Now, it's worth noting that when we're talking about James Kitchen, he's kind of a bit of a niche lawyer, it appears. He did quite a bit of work with the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. That's the John Carpay organization that hired a private investigator to follow stalk a judge, for which John Carpay lost his ability to do law in the province where that happened. John Carpay also, who's famous for also making comparisons to the Nazi flag. James Kitchen used to work for the JCCF. But as intrepid reporter Charles Rusnell pointed out this week, he's also got some views of his own. So Mr. Rusnell went through James's Twitter machine and he found some retweets. Now, I'll refer you back to what I said earlier. Only compare Nazis to Nazis. Using anything else diminishes and shows patent ignorance of the severity and the horrors that were the Holocaust and the Nazi war machine. But here's Mr. Kitchen nonetheless, putting it all out there. Retweeted the Babylon Bee. Trudeau attempts to distract from Nazi controversy by growing cool new mustache, and somebody's gone ahead and photoshopped on a mustache that has striking similarities to certain historical figures. There's another one that talks about the next vaccine rollout, and there's a cartoon of somebody getting a shot. And the person getting the shot wearing a mask says, what variant does this protect me against? And the response is, you're actually helping transgender Ukrainians fight global warming. So that's Mr. Kitchen's take on humor, I guess. Moving on from there. Danielle Smith. She just provided so much great stuff this week. She had herself a press conference because one of the things that has been consuming a lot of the media oxygen over the last couple of weeks has been the E. coli outbreak in Calgary. Well, Danielle Smith held a press conference. She's going to do some things. She's going to take action. woman of action Danielle Smith is. And so she held a press conference where she appeared and they announced, her and Adriana Lagrange, not to be confused with Monique Lagrange, announced that former Calgary Police Chief Rick Hansen would be chairing a panel to look at what allowed the recent E. coli outbreak. And there's some questions that come up because Mr. Hansen comes with his own baggage. He did, in fact, run for the PCs in 2015 at the same time that Smith tried to. It's worth remembering that in 2015, Danielle Smith didn't get the nomination for the PCs that she wanted to. She lost that nomination. But Mr. Hansen had some controversy surrounding his nomination. And there was actually a whole investigation that went into it because one of the things that allegedly happened was Mr. Hansen decided to move a whole bunch of police officers into the area that he was going to be running in literally right before he stepped down from his role as police chief. So he moved a whole bunch of he used allegedly the powers of being the chief of police to move in a whole bunch of cops to say, oh, look what I've done for you people of the area. I increased policing in your area. Aren't I a generous and benevolent police chief? You probably want me as your next MLA, I imagine. But that's not, and this is where we kind of bumped because we could have sworn that we heard Mr. Hansen's name referenced more recently. And it turns out we did. Hansen was also appointed by Madu in 2021. And the quote, I would like to thank Minister Madu for the honor of being appointed as the chair of the newly created Alberta Parole Board. It's a privilege to continue to serve Albertans, and I look forward to working with the other board members. It is our firm commitment to work diligently to make our communities safer. Now, it's worth noting that being chair of the Parole Board, he's pulling down almost $70,000 a year. So he's not doing this out of the goodness of his heart. He's serving as the chair for the Parole Board, and he's getting paid very well to do it. Well, now he's getting paid to investigate the E. coli outbreak and what led to it, what things should be done to address it. And that comes after there's been some questions as to how effective has this new Alberta Parole Board been. There was a news story from back in May of last year that pointed out the Alberta Parole Board heard fewer than 100 cases in its first 15 months. So not really churning through the numbers like they said that they were going to. So there's a lot of questions about, hey, is he still going to be on the parole board? Like, it seems like they're kind of overwhelmed getting through the number of cases that they are. And now he's going to be doing this whole other investigation panel thinger as well. That seems a little heavy. But then we got to and see, this is the thing with Danielle Smith press conferences, and I think most people have learned this, is like, she's going to go up and she's going to say some words, and they'll be scripted, and her delivery will be bang on, because if you give Danielle a script, she's able to knock it out of the park 9 times out of 10. But then when you get to the questions, that's when it gets good. And sure enough, there was one particular question that caught a lot of people's attention.
Just curious if we have a sense of when that's going to be available here in Alberta, and if the province is going to be launching any kind of campaign to encourage people to do that. And I guess personally, if you yourself are planning to get the shot.
I'll let Minister Lagrange tell you. I think we're just preparing the final details on the press release on that.
Before that, would you be getting the shot?
Look, I'm a healthy person. I tend to take care of my immune system, and I believe this is something I should talk about with my doctor, not media.
Okay. Question to you, Minister Lagrange. Do you plan to get the shot?
It depends which shot you're talking about. Like I'm looking. I'm very healthy as well. I have a very healthy immune system, and you know what? I also believe that this is a personal decision for individuals to make. I will look at that as time progresses and what my journey is. But again, this is a personal decision. People have to make it for themselves, for their children, and we respect the decisions that people make.
Yeah, as some people have pointed out on the social medias, that's probably a great answer for everyone who is concerned about whether or not Lagrange, as health minister, given her history as an anti-abortion activist, would be would be dealing with the question of limiting access to women's health care, because very clearly she believes that these conversations should only be had between a person and their doctor, and it's nobody else's business. Nobody should be getting involved in that sort of thing. That's just crazy talk, because she's on her own personal journey with her healthy immune system. It's also worth noting lots of healthy people died from COVID. There's this misconception that if you have a healthy immune system, whatever that means, I'm not sure what the diagnostic test is for determining how healthy an immune system is. Because when we're talking about immune responses, things get really, really, really complicated really quickly. And with many infections, it's actually a strong immune response that causes some of the problems that people experience with infections. So it gets really complicated really, really quickly. But to say I've got a healthy immune system, I take care of myself, it's no big deal. Not only is a gross misrepresentation of the medicine, but more importantly, it's a complete abdication of leadership. The province released some health numbers, and these are, by many estimations, very conservative numbers for the number of cases and the number of deaths that have happened in the province. Right now, the province of Alberta is averaging 2 deaths a day from COVID that the government will confirm. Now, there's a lot of people who say, 2 deaths, we got like 4.4 million people here. That's not that much, but it's preventable. And that's the part that should resonate. Danielle Smith might as well be arguing, you know what? I was thinking I might have a couple of drinks on my way driving home because I've got a healthy immune system. It's the same kind of logic, and it's incredibly flawed. But more importantly, it is a complete abdication of leadership. Danielle Smith has said, we need to listen to the scientists. We need to listen to the experts. We need to listen to the doctors. She said all of those things, and all of those experts that are credible, before anybody starts rolling out the not credible ones, all of those experts have said one of the best things that you can do is get immunized. Immunizations are the great golden gift from medicine to humanity over the last 100 years and change. It is so huge what immunizations do. Get immunized. I'm going to be getting my COVID shot as soon as I get the opportunity opens up for the bivalent shots, which are supposed to be coming very, very soon. That was an announcement that was made as well this week. I don't have any problem saying that. And it should be something that is normalized by people who are certainly part of the apparatus that is trying to say, hey, you should get immunized. If you believe in evidence-based medicine, this should be a no-brainer. If you're a public-facing figure who believes in evidence-based medicine, or at least advocates for it, or pretends to advocate for it, then this should be a no-brainer. But instead, Danielle Smith couldn't even answer the question as to yes or no. She couldn't even take a position on that. She gave a bullshit answer about how, you know what? It's I have a healthy immune system. I take care of myself. It's all good. I'm not going to answer your question because it's private. It's a failure, is what it is. But one of the questions, the whole impetus for that question was, hey, what's the province going to be doing to promote COVID vaccines? What's the province going to be doing to support people getting COVID vaccines? And they did release a little bit of information on that, because the province came out to pharmacists and said, yeah, so you know how we've been paying you to do the COVID shots? We've been paying you a certain amount of money. How would you feel if we just started working our way towards cutting that amount by half? The Alberta Pharmacists Association released a special edition of their newsletter on September 29th, where they announced that there's going to be a reduction from they're reducing the fee for administration of COVID-19 vaccines from $25, which was negotiated in 2020. And they actually had a premium as well for doses administered on weekends and evenings. So it was $35 if pharmacists were administering those doses on evenings and weekends. But the base amount was $25. There's going to be a reduction for the fee for administration to $17 effective today and to $13 on April 1st, 2024. Now, you might wonder, why is this important? Why does this matter? How does this affect potentially the availability of COVID shots? And the answer to that is pharmacists do more than administer COVID shots. And so one of the things that pharmacists could do with that $35 per vaccination is put an extra pharmacist on. Most pharmacies have multiple pharmacists. So if you knew that there were going to be X number of people coming in, you could put an extra pharmacist on to make sure that you were able to meet the demand for COVID shots. But now all of a sudden, if you drop it down to $17 an hour with the target of $13 an hour down the road, now you're making it much harder for pharmacists to designate that time when they have all of their other regular pharmacist duties to do. You're using economics to force pharmacists to prioritize what they're going to do, how often they're going to make these shots available. And it's irresponsible. And it's something that the Pharmacists Association has openly come out and condemned. From the end of their statement, in the coming months, RxA, which is the Pharmacists Association, will continue our work to champion the important role that community pharmacists play in the provision of primary health care in the province and work toward achieving appropriate funding to support these efforts. To say that we are disappointed at this announcement can't be overstated, as we believe that support for community pharmacist provision of primary care should be the priority for the government, especially while the entire health system struggles with burnout, workforce shortages, and the onset of COVID, flu, RSV, and the respiratory illness season. I wonder if they did consultation before they rolled out this decision. Not really. But that's not the only major healthcare change that we can expect. There's a couple of other things that we got to talk about here. One of them has to do with what Smith announced to the Rural Municipalities Convention on Friday. She doubled down on her commitment to break up, to decentralize Alberta Health Services. She wants to remove AHS entirely, it sounds like, from non-acute functions such as midwifery, primary care staffing, and continuing care. So she wants AHS to only be dealing with the emergency side of things. Now, it's worth noting that a couple of people have pointed out already that when we're talking about the primary care, that's Alberta Health, not Alberta Health Services. So it's a little alarming that this appears to be another area where Danielle Smith hasn't quite wrapped her head around the entire concept of what's going on there. But that's just one of the things that we've seen in regards to the healthcare system over the last little while. There were a lot of people who were quite concerned about a couple of draft policies that got a lot of attention over the last couple of days. Now, these are proposed amendments that were proposed for the UCP AGM to address the UCP's official policy on healthcare, and some of them are pretty alarming. Now, it's also worth noting that these policies were actually brought forward by the Alberta Prosperity Project. They're very, very clear. And in fact, these policies are sourced out of the Alberta Prosperity Project's website. And the story that the Alberta Prosperity Project presents on their website is, hey, you know what? There's these members of the UCP from Calgary Lougheed who agree with everything that we wrote down in our we should be a private country or a separate country rule book, where we were talking about forming our own party. There's some folks in the UCP who agree with that, and they've put forward some of these policies. We're advancing APP's vision at the UCP AGM. Some of the things that they talk about that they want to introduce as amendments: enshrining the sacrosanct doctor-patient relationship by protecting Albertan physicians from undue third-party interference, to neither compel them to prescribe treatments nor prohibit them from prescribing treatments, and to include the right of Albertans physicians to prescribe off-label medications using their best discretion with the informed consent of the patient. So we're talking about things like ivermectin. How do we know that? Because they literally talk about ivermectin a couple of paragraphs down. And the medicine that they refer to in this policy statement is in and of itself broken. But what they're arguing for is that there should be no interference, even from the College of Physicians. So no amount of evidence-based medicine should be able to interfere with medicine is a fascinating position to take. But that's what they're arguing for. They also argue that they should amend the Medical Profession Act to require the College of Physicians and Surgeons to fully respect the right of all doctors to research, speak, and write, which they have. Furthermore, doctors should be protected from having their licenses threatened for publicly expressing heterodox opinions, including during times of crisis. And they talk about, again, there were physicians who had their licenses suspended, others who lost their positions in universities for speaking out about the possibilities of maybe there's other woo medicine that we could explore. And this is where it gets really important to realize that when we're talking about physicians, as in any profession, there are going to be physicians out there who are the top 20%. They're amazing. They're fantastic at their jobs. They're a gift to the healthcare system. There's going to be a boatload in the middle that also are pretty good. They're okay. They get the job done. They're not knocking it out of the park. They're not hurting anyone. But in any profession, you've always got that low 20%. And if there aren't mechanisms in place to protect the public from that low 20%, then there's going to be potentially very real problems, and there's going to be people who get hurt. The notion of informed consent is at best aspirational. And certainly with major medical procedures, health organizations do their very best to list off, here's all the possible things that could possibly happen because these things have at some point been affiliated with this treatment. That's one of the reasons why when you read the inserts on any given medication, it's got a list of things a mile long that could potentially happen because we haven't been able to prove that they don't happen. And they happened in a trial at some point. So it's possible. That's what that's all about. The notion that the average person is going to be able to wrap their head around all of those possibilities is aspirational. And it's certainly something that should be strived for. But if a physician is a crap physician and they've gone down the woo rabbit hole and they start recommending things that have no evidence, what that policy is effectively arguing for is human trials that should just be able to be done in the real world, consequences be damned. One of the other policies that they talk about, which is again incredibly disrespectful, they want to guarantee the right of all Albertans to to equal and full access to all publicly funded healthcare services, and that no agent of government, including physicians and other healthcare workers, shall deny any medical treatment or procedure to an Albertan due to their vaccination status or for any other decision based on reasons of conscious or bodily autonomy. So we're talking about organ donations. And let's be very, very clear. Organ donations are absolutely a gift. That's critically important to understand. They are a gift from a person who has lost their life, and they are a gift from their family. And nobody is entitled to be able to pick and choose what body parts of a fellow Albertan they would like to harvest for themselves. Thank you very much. It is profoundly entitled and profoundly disrespectful to the enormity of that gift. And because there's a shortage of those gifts, there absolutely has to be a methodology in place to make sure that those gifts are going to go to the people who are going to best be able to use them. We don't do liver transplants every 2 years for somebody who has unaddressed alcoholism issues, because they're going to destroy that liver, where that liver could save and prolong another person's life. It's cold and it's calculated. It's sometimes very difficult to understand. But when we're talking about that kind of a gift, to give it to someone who doesn't believe that they should have to do the bare minimum, who is willing to selectively choose what sort of evidence-based medicine they want to believe in, it's ludicrous. When you think about the simple procedure, and I shouldn't say simple, but when you think about the procedure and the science and the medicine that's involved in an organ transplant, to then turn around and say, okay, I believe in all the immunosuppressants. I believe in all the anti-clotting agents that are given. I believe in all of the matching that happens and all of the skill that the surgeons and the nurses and the anesthesiologists bring into the equation. I believe in all of the supports that come after the fact. But, you know, that vaccine, I'm just not sure about it, it quite frankly renders me largely speechless. Because it's so ludicrous. If you can imagine showing up at Christmas and somebody says, I have a gift for you, but it needs to be, there's holes in the box. The gift's a puppy in this metaphor, by the way. You need to keep the holes in the box clear. And somebody goes, no, I don't want to keep the holes in the box clear. I don't want it to smell. I don't know what it is, but I want to apply my own conditions to how I receive this box with air holes in it. I'd like to cover up the air holes. In effect, that's what this policy is arguing for. Now, it's worth noting that these are policies that were submitted. And the Alberta Prosperity Project made the argument, hey, everybody, you got to get in there and support all of these things. But the final resolutions for the UCP Policy Convention will be released on October 13th. So we're 2 weeks away from potentially finding out whether or not any of these policies actually made it in. Right now, the UCP membership is voting on the policies that they feel are most important. And we've talked about some of those policies before. Some of them are also pretty jarring. But that process hasn't been completed, and the results won't be revealed until October 13th, where the policies are announced that will be voted on at the UCP convention. So whether or not these policies actually make it anywhere, we don't know yet. But the bottom line is there are people out there who are trying to influence the political process who believe in these things. And they were able to get a proxy constituency association to submit their policies on their behalf, which is absolutely wild. Because as we've detailed before, the Alberta Prosperity Project, historically, not only are they a separatist party, but they're also a party that made it very, very clear they want to be their own party. So you've got an aspirational political party writing policy via the UCP so that their policy that they want for their political party gets in to actual UCP policy. It's an absolutely mind-blowing state of affairs. But it seems to be increasingly the norm in Alberta politics. And you're absolutely right. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the folks from Take Back Alberta. This is wild. This this whole thing is just so off the cuff. Take Back Alberta has been trying to bring into Alberta an American mathematician who doesn't like anybody who supports the LGBTQ2S+ community, calls them groomers. If you do, we know this because he did it to us. But they've been trying to bring him in for a while, and they've had a little bit of trouble securing venues. They had 2 venues initially, and then both of those venues said no. And then they had a ticket selling company that they were using, and that ticket selling company said, whoa, 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 you didn't say you were doing this. We don't want anything to do with this, and backed out of their deal. Now, Take Back Alberta was able to secure a venue up in Edmonton for the Dr. James Lindsay Protect Our Children show in Edmonton, which is going on tomorrow. But Calgary's surprisingly, if you think about the 2 cities, which one's going to be, where is it going to be easier to host a train wreck rally where we talk about the gays and the communists and all of the things? Because, boy, that doesn't sound like any kind of historical rhetoric. What's going on with there? You would think that Edmonton would be the city to say, yeah, we're not going to have that here. But in fact, it's Calgary that has pushed back. The Calgary venues have pushed back the most. They lost their first venue. Then they went to the second venue. They lost that venue. Then they went to the third venue. They lost that venue. They claimed briefly on their website that they had booked the Deerfoot Casino, but then they lost that venue as well. And so it really begs the question, like, where is the Calgary thing going to be held? Is David Parker going to be just like we did a thing about how maybe he was going to hard pitch to the folks at Denny's? Maybe they could get themselves a nice Denny's parking lot. Maybe they could get themselves a skillet. Maybe he'd be a whole lot less hangry. We don't know. But one of the big questions is, why is this Dr. James Lindsay so controversial? And we've talked about the poster for this event before, because it harkens to a lot of the anti-LGBTQ2S+ community rhetoric. We can see the Protect Our Kids is stopping the trans colors from dripping on Dr. Lindsay, because if the colors got him, I guess he'd turn trans. I mean, I didn't think it was that easy, but that's what the poster seems to be suggesting. But it's a poster. Maybe he's just talking about Aegis. How bad can it be? We're going to bring up the Wikipedia entry yet again, because it spells it out very, very clearly what the problems with that some people believe Dr. Lindsay are. And again, doctor is PhD mathematician. So, presumably he's good at math. But in regards to sociology or human sexuality or gender studies or political science, that's not what his, or medicine, that's not what his PhD's in. Let's just get that out of the way right away. Lindsay has promoted and or been linked to several prominent conspiracy theories. He's a proponent of the right-wing LGBT grooming conspiracy theory and has been credited as one of several public figures responsible for popularizing groomer as a slur directed at LGBTQ educators and activists by members of the political right. So I guess, I don't know, should we be proud of the fact that we got called groomer by Dr. James Lindsay? I'm going to say no, because grooming is actually a long-term process that sexual predators use against people that they're looking to prey on. It's not in the same way that you shouldn't say Nazi to somebody who's not a legitimate Nazi. You shouldn't say groomer to somebody who's not a legitimate groomer. Just because you're using colloquial terminology doesn't make you clever. If anything, it makes you more ignorant. Lindsay has referred to the pride flag as the flag of the hostile enemy. In 2021, Lindsay wrote on Twitter that there will be, quotes, there will be a genocide of whites if critical race theory isn't stopped. His statement was met with widespread criticism, including from founder of libertarian anti-identity politics magazine Quillette, Claire Lehman, who wrote, James Lindsay is now peddling white genocide theory, implying that a genocide against whites in the U.S. is imminent, has the potential to inspire racist violence. Such comments are extreme, reckless, and irresponsible. They should be announced. So again, I know I've said it before, but when you find yourself on the right of Quillette, damn! Lindsay has promoted the far-right cultural Marxism conspiracy theory, which alleges a concerted effort by Marxist critical theorists to infiltrate academic and cultural institutions in order to destroy Western civilization. This theory has been wholly rejected by mainstream scholars and has been characterized as anti-Semitic by the Southern Poverty Law Center and others. So it's a complete and total mystery why it is that some venues wouldn't want to have their brand affiliated with Dr. Lindsay's views, presentation, overall tone, demeanor, and it's probably telling to many that Take Back Alberta does. I mean, David Parker has embraced all of these views. He's parroted them for quite some time now. He's clearly not rejecting them, which puts David Parker, presumably, speculatively, on the right of Quillette, which again, damn. So they went through all their venues. They couldn't get any venues. They were very sad, Panda. They talked about they were the victims of a boycott, even though they're one of David Parker's affiliates, Mahmoud Musa, called for a boycott of any business that has any kind of a multicolored flag that they're flying, which makes it pretty clear. So it's fascinating how those tactics are like super not cool or totally cool until they get applied to you. But this is where it gets awesome. Because they haven't canceled. They refuse to cancel. If it comes down to the Denny's parking lot, it'll come down to the Denny's parking lot. We're going to have this show, no matter what, said David Parker from Take Back Alberta, said James Lindsay from wherever James Lindsay was at the time. They have a new location. It's going to be announced top secret style 2 hours before the event, which just, for me, conjures up this image of all of these people who buy into what has been characterized as anti-Semitic conspiracy theories that are not based in any way in reality, that inspire racist violence, that are anti-LGBTQ, that believe that the pride flag is the flag of a hostile enemy. I just have this image of all of these people sitting in their cars waiting for the text message to tell them where to go. When your views are so abhorrent that you can't get a venue to publicly book you and you have to go all secret squirrel, that should tell you something. That should be reason to take a little bit of a pause and go, oh, maybe we don't have this as figured out as maybe we thought we did. Maybe there's a reason everybody is like, hey, could you maybe not hate in Canada? I mean, we're the tolerant country. And when you think of where Alberta sits on the political spectrum historically, Take Back Alberta has their rallies, their meetings across the province all the time. They're able to find venues and spaces to have all of those things. They've never talked about having a problem booking a Take Back Alberta event. And yet this dude is so polarizing. They have to smuggle him in under the cover of a 2-hour warning. But the big takeaway, I think, when it comes to the Take Back Alberta piece and the shit show that is Albertans stepped up. Calgarians stepped up. And they said, you know what? If you're going to try to do this stuff, we're going to make sure that the venues know what it is that they're hosting. And if the venues then decide, as we see they very clearly seem to have in Edmonton, that they're okay with that, that's the free market, baby. But if the venues decide that they don't want their brand affiliated with views that are anti-Semitic, with views that are hateful, with views that talk about the genocide of whites, like, if an organization, a venue decides they don't want their brand to have anything to do with that, guess what? That's also the free market. To try to say that venues should be forced to host bigoted views, to host political rallies, that sounds like something else entirely. Which brings us to our last segment before we open it up for the open mic. As always, if you're listening to the show, if you're watching the show on the YouTube or the Facebook, if you're on the Facebook, I'm sorry about all of the comments that are probably there. I haven't looked yet. We've been trying to moderate them a little bit more aggressively because boy, the Facebook brings the people out. But if you're on the YouTubes or the Facebook and you want to weigh in with something, then by all means, hop on the X Spaces, X Twitter Spaces. Does that work? I feel like that works. Hop on the Spaces and you can weigh in. You can tell us what you think we got right. You can tell us what we think we got wrong. You can tell us. I mean, we had somebody tell us that they were Spider-Man once, so do with that what you will. But before we get there, we got one more thing that we want to quickly talk about because, again, I think it speaks a little bit to the credibility piece. This is going to be our last little bit on Mr. Parker for the evening. He tweeted out yesterday, "Don't register your podcast. Do not comply." It's like this. It blows my mind how nobody goes, "Wait, what? Is that really what's going on here?" And of course, the answer is no, that's not really what's going on here. This is apparently a response to the announcement by the government of Canada that they are stepping forward in regards to addressing the Wild West that is the internet and trying to make sure that instead of people getting fed hyperpolarizing U.S. culture wars content, they can get their hyperpolarizing Canadian culture wars content from Canadian sources. The announcement on September 29th, today the CRTC is advancing its regulatory plan to modernize Canada's broadcasting framework and ensure online streaming services make meaningful contributions to Canadian and Indigenous content. On May 12th, 2023, the CRTC launched its first public consultations after thoroughly examining all of the evidence on the public record, including over 200 interventions. The CRTC is issuing its first two decisions. First, the CRTC is setting out which online streaming services need to provide information about their activities in Canada. Online streaming services that operate in Canada offer broadcasting content and earn 10 million or more in annual revenues will need to complete a registration form by November 28th, 2023. Registration collects basic information, is only required once. It can be completed in just a few steps. Second, the CRTC is setting conditions for online streaming services to operate in Canada. These conditions take effect today and require certain online streaming services to provide the CRTC with information related to their content and subscribership. This decision also requires those services to make content available in a way that is not tied to specific mobile or internet service. So, to be clear, nobody has to register their podcast. That's stupid. There are hundreds of thousands of podcasts that are readily available for Canadian people. What the CRTC is saying is, hey, if you're a platform like Apple Podcasts or any of the other there's so many podcasting platforms out there. Every once in a while we get an email from someone saying, hey, my thing isn't working on this platform, and we have to go, we're on that platform. There's a lot of different platforms out there. A lot of them do make a little bit of money. Some of them make a lot of money. And all that the CRTC is saying with this ruling is that if you're somebody who's facilitating the streaming, so for example, we use a platform called Podcaster. I believe it's run by Spotify. Spotify has to say, hey, we do that podcast thing here in Canada. That's a service that we provide. We make more than $10 million a year. That's it. There's no like individual podcast registration that's going on. That's just straight up misinformed fear mongering. If only these people took a breath and stopped and read the things that they're actually so upset about, maybe we could avoid a lot of the problems and the fear that people are experiencing. And to that end, before I open it up for the open mic, I want to plug two of our upcoming episodes. On Wednesday, we're going to be dropping a conversation with John Roggeveen. It's a hard G. You'll understand why that's important when we drop the episode, who is the current leader of the Alberta Liberal Party. They have themselves an AGM coming up right away here, and they're going to be dealing with a little bit of an existential crisis. We got a little bit of a peek into what that existential crisis looks like and what it's potentially going to entail over the next little bit in our conversation with John Roggeveen. That is going to be available for all of our Patreon subscribers tomorrow. And it will be going up live on Wednesday. for everybody else. It'll be streaming there because we never paywall any of our stuff because that's not cool. That doesn't help conversations. Next week, we're going to have a conversation with the president of the Alberta Teachers Association for the area of Calgary. It's a good little chat that we're going to be having. And we're really, really excited to bring it to you because rather than talking more about the dumpster fire that is the David Parker show and the Take Back Alberta show, we're going to be talking about what's actually going on. What are the actual problems that are happening with the education system? What are the obstacles that teachers are having to deal with? What are the biggest issues the teachers are having to deal with? Because as much as Take Back Alberta absolutely represents a very real threat, as much as they are trying to upend the education system, as much as they're trying to introduce their own agenda, it doesn't change the fact that there are very real problems that teachers and the education system are facing. And so to make sure that we have a little bit of a handle on that and to do our part to try to make sure that those issues, as well as some gratitude towards teachers, gets raised, we're going to be presenting our conversation with Stephanie Clements, who, like I said, is the president of the Alberta Teachers Association, Local 38. That's going to be the following Wednesday. We'll be doing our live show, as we always do, on the Sunday next week, because we'll be back, because that's the thing that we do. And that's pretty much the end of the planned content, except for the plugs. But I like to do the plugs at the end because I don't want people running away. And we do have a couple people that are weighing in with their thoughts on the Twitter Spaces, the X Spaces, whatever it is. So we're going to bring in first one of our regulars, Cassandra, to see what Cassandra has to say. Cassandra, what's going on tonight?
Well, I just, everybody knows my housing situation. I'm officially homeless right now. I did negotiate some time with my landlord, but I'm technically supposed to be out already. But I was calling around different organizations and trying to find some kind of help. And, I've recently been at a town hall last month with the federal housing advocate, and there was a lot of frontline people there. And there was also talk about what I'm going to talk about at the Calgary City Council from some frontline service providers. But I called Nixon's office, and I basically left a message saying, this isn't something you can pass me down the line. This is something that Minister Nixon has to hear. And the person on the other end of the line, anyway, I was explaining to them my situation and everything that I have personally done over 5 months to find myself housing, including all the wait lists I've been on and all the doctor's notes I've had to get to move myself up into priority for Calgary housing. And I explained that even though I already knew this information, I still went out of my way to go and talk to, a frontline service provider and say, hey, if the worst happens and I don't find a place in time, what then? And they said, look, we can't even tell you that we can get you into a temporary shelter because they're all full. And this person in Nixon's office had the gall to turn around and tell me that that wasn't true. And I said to her, I said, so you're telling me that every frontline worker that was at the housing town hall with the federal advocate and everybody that I've talked to try to, they're all lying? And she's like, well, I didn't say a person was lying. And it's like, well, you said that what they're saying isn't true. And then she went on to tell me about how Jason Nixon apparently goes and tours all these shelters all the time. And somehow that means that he knows, but the people that are on the front lines dealing with it every single day trying to get people housing, they don't know anything. And so just a tip about how, I guess that's just basically how our provincial government sees the housing situation. I got screamed at and talked over and yelled out a lot of numbers and about housing that's going to be built in 2 to 3 years and numbers of amounts of money that they're throwing at different things. And when I was screaming, because this person was screaming over me, I'm talking over them saying, well, what about today? What about yesterday? What about last week? And for that, I was told, well, you're screaming now. I need to end this call.
Damn, Cassandra. There's so much that I don't even know where to start with that. I mean, first of all, this is it has been heartbreaking watching listening to you come on week after week and hoping that you're going to be able to find a solution, and quite frankly, hoping that a solution was going to be available to you, and to hear that this is where you are now. I mean, there's nothing that I can offer more than just that's so it's been like watching two cars drive towards each other and hoping that something's going to change, and then bam, there it is. It's absolutely brutal, and I
don't expect you to do anything or be able to offer me. I'm just putting it out there because, like, when I look at my whole situation, I don't have any addictions. I do have mental health, but it's not to the point where it causes me, I have some PTSD and stuff, but, doesn't make me hard to house. I've got good landlord reference. I've got good character references. I probably have better character references than most. And, there's nothing in my life that should make it so difficult for me to find a place to live. And so, it's troubling because I hear things on the news. There was a family that was on CTV a few weeks ago that are going to be living in their car. 3 of them are in wheelchairs, and they're looking at living in their vehicle. And, this is, and our government's response is, look at all the money we're throwing at everything we might have housing for you in 2 or 3 years. And I'm trying to tell them, look, this isn't a crisis anymore. This is an emergency. And I don't know, I just putting it out to the airwaves to say, we need to put pressure on this government to recognize the emergency for what it is. Calgary City Council recently passed a motion to put up temporary modular housing for families. And now, statistically, the people that are most at risk of both housing and food insecurity in Canada and in Alberta are single people like myself. And then you add, intersectionality, like I'm female, women and gender diverse are high on the list to be at risk, and as well as being disabled. And, that's the reality. And it's, although it's nice, I know that there's families out there that could use homes. But the reason that it's not families that are even low-income ones that are typically in the higher demographic of those that are most at risk is because for decades, governments at all levels have always focused their priorities around housing towards families. And so, I mean, I was a single mom. It was much easier to get services as a single parent than it is as a single person with disabilities. And, so that's a big reason why it's singles, because we're constantly, not looked at. It's when they think of housing, it's like, oh, we got to get those kids off the street. And then a lot of people, like single people, even with disabilities, tend to get pushed down the line in priority over and above families. And so that's why families are less likely than a single person right now. It's because of decades of the way governments have funded housing.
Cassandra, can I ask you a couple questions?
Yeah.
You're in Calgary, right?
Yep.
Okay. Are you okay if I share your Twitter handle?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, obviously, I recognize that this is such a widespread problem, and as you said yourself, there's no shortage of people who are experiencing this sort of
Yep.
thing. I think it's. I'm going to try so hard not to use profanity here right now, but boy, do I want to. I think it's absolutely embarrassing. Provincially, I think all levels of government should be absolutely embarrassed by the fact that they've allowed this situation to get where it is. I mean, we did the math on the back of a napkin here at the show a couple of days ago, where we took a look at just the cost of one of Danielle Smith's stupid, pointless advertising campaigns, and the fact that she could put literally thousands of people up in hotel rooms for literally 6 months for the cost of what she's spending on either the pension advertising campaign or the "Don't Let Albertans Freeze in the Dark." Like,
The people are freezing in the dark. They're going to be freezing out in the street because I'm out here. I just put my winter coat on to go out to the drugstore to pick up something. It's already chilly, and yeah,
so
yeah. Those are the people freezing in the dark.
I'm going to throw it out there to anybody who's listening from our Calgary audience. If there's anything that you can do, if you know anybody who has, I mean, what's your monthly budget? I think you said it was around $1,000 for housing.
Well, I'm paying $1,000. That's what I've been paying. I can go up to 12. I mean, honestly, 1,300 with utilities included is about my max. Although I've been looking at stretching my budget to up to 1,400, but that's really putting me in a bad way. Although I can do it. I mean, I'd rather have a roof over my head and go to the food bank than not have a roof over my head.
Yeah. So anyone in our Calgary or Calgary and area audience, and I know that we denigrate our reach on a regular basis, but we have a bit of a reach. So if there's anybody in Calgary who has a line on anywhere that might be
With a cat, I got a cat.
There you go. Okay,
the
so cat
shelter,
too.
the animal shelters are full too. They're not taking surrenders.
If Cassandra's handle is at Mopar Maiden BC. I'm going to spell that out. If anybody has a line on a spot, a place that can put Cassandra up for the budget that she, like, fuck me. I'm sorry. I remember 10 years ago, I rented an apartment in Kensington, for Christ's sakes, and I was paying $595 a month, and that included utilities. The situation has gotten so out of control. It's absolutely mind bending. But if anybody has a line on a place that will accept a cat for $1,000 a month or a little bit more,
like 1,200, 1,300. I'll do 1,300 like that. I mean, reasonably. I haven't had my rent. I haven't had my. I had a wonderful landlord that didn't raise my rent for 7 years. So I mean, I probably should be, paying about 1,300. So I can do that. But yeah.
Yeah. Hit up, send a DM, tag her in a tweet if you can find anything. And again, I'm going to read it out letter by letter because I don't want this to slip through the cracks. I mean, obviously the breakdown is not going to be solving the housing crisis, but if we can help one of our listeners maybe find a place, I think that we're doing the bare minimum at that point. It's MOPARMAIDENBC. That's Cassandra's Twitter X handle.
ENBC, yeah.
Yeah, ENBC. If anybody can help, please do.
Thank you. Thanks, Nate. I appreciate it.
I wish I could do more, Cassandra. This is
No,
just...
you know what? You do lots, and you gave me the space to not just tell my story, but tell my story in the broader sense, and the fact that it's not just me. And, you know, if somebody like me can't find housing, there's plenty of people that are in tougher, that, you know, that don't have my acumen, they don't have my, you know, my skill for accessing and navigating bureaucracy and resources. They don't have my, you know, the kind of references that I have. And, you know, and maybe they're even harder off financially. And so if, the way I look at it is, if I can't find a place, then there's lots more out there, and I just want to amplify that.
Yeah.
But thanks.
Cassandra, please keep us in the loop. I mean, especially if you're able to find something, please let us know.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And I would encourage you to swing over to I don't know if you have the ability with whatever device you're on, but if you can check out the YouTube chat, there's a couple folks in there that are piping in with a few things, and hopefully we can, you know, as the breakdown community, and I know I talk about how awesome our chat group is and how awesome the community is, but as the breakdown community, if we can find you something, I hope we can.
Thanks a lot.
All right. I'm gonna move on to Lynn. We got a few other people who have piped in, so we're gonna work our way through the list. But I'm gonna bring another one of our regulars, Lynn, in. Lynn, what's going on tonight?
Well, Jesus, Nate.
I know, right?
Like, I was going to talk about Nazis versus nationalism, but after Cassandra, who I always end up after, I just want to say this. Bunny's got a place she found already, and I will be going on her Twitter, because she's breaking my heart right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll send her some money. Like, I don't know. It's just, the world has just gone crazy at this moment.
I don't disagree with you.
So I don't want to talk about what I want to talk
fair.
about. I just want support for Cassandra. She's a great, very bright woman on this page,
and an incredible advocate. Like,
yeah,
she and you know, the housing thing is so complex, and like I've said before, we don't want to do it a disservice by representing it poorly or by talking about it poorly, but like this is it in real time, and it's fucking tragic.
yeah.
I don't know what else to say, so I feel you entirely. And again, if anybody does have any line on anything in the Calgary area that does accept a cat, please reach out to Cassandra on her Twitter. She has an email on that profile as well that I imagine she will be checking. Anything like that. I mean, if we can find, I believe that the breakdown audience can make this one thing happen, is what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
So
I agree with that too. And I see Charlie's asking me about the 3 murders in McMurray this last week, and all I'm going to say about that is there's a drug war going on, and there's actually been 4. The 4th one was, you know, suicide by cop, but, you know, it's not normal for here, so it's quite upsetting. And but Cassandra's issue is more upsetting to me than that even right now. So I'm just going to say goodnight.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Yeah. I don't know what else to say. Other than I'm just gonna appeal one more time to everybody who's either watching this show live or listening to it. If you have a line on a place, Cassandra has been a remarkable advocate. She speaks up all the time on the show. She's always very passionate. She's always advocating for other people. This is something that we're not going to solve the housing crisis overnight, and I'm not suggesting that, but part of the impetus for this show was to try to keep some things from falling through the cracks, and we should be able to collectively keep one of our own from falling through the cracks. We've got Chris, who is raised his hand to be a speaker as well. Chris, what's going on tonight, my friend?
Hey, not too much. Thanks for having me on, Nate.
Anytime.
Okay, the one thing I was gonna say that I mean, I could rant forever. I'm not going to. The only thing I want to mention is how frustrated I am that Edmonton is still having Dr. Lindsay or quote unquote Dr. Lindsay at in Edmonton. It's frustrating. Um, especially because as a city, as Edmonton, it's all NDP. This is a very progressive city. This is a very we're the Austin of if Alberta is Texas, we are Austin. That we're the weird city, and so knowing that this guy's going to be there is just so frustrating. And on top of that, I actually kind of find it interesting too where the event's being held because it's being held in the south side of the city, which I want to argue is more conservative. But again, that's me saying that anecdotally. So that's really all I have to add. I just find it so frustrating that, obviously it's nice that, this group is still having to struggle finding a place for their little, powwow or, hate rally, whatever you want to call it. Sorry, wrong phrase there. But it's so frustrating that, more people are in Edmonton aren't publicly saying, hey, we know this is happening. What the hell?
Yeah. I mean, I want to be clear. I kind of struggle with this question because, I mean, I think that it's gross that anybody wants to bring in the U.S. style culture wars bullshit. I think it's embarrassing. I think it's beneath us as a province and a country. I mean, we obviously, David Parker's from Alberta. We've got our own homegrown crazy doing just fine. I don't think we need to import anything. But I also do believe in freedom of expression. And if this venue, there's no doubt in my mind at this point, given the volume of emails that we've been made aware of, and I have no doubts that we're only a tiny, tiny cog in a great big machine. There's no way that the management and ownership of that venue are not aware of what they're bringing in. And if that's what they choose to do, that's what they choose to do. And there's... I don't want to ever get to a place and this is where it gets important because I think that there's a big line between, let's call it hateful speech, and hate speech. The requirements for hate speech are pretty high, and I don't think, I think that. In the same way that, I've said before, I think that Mr. Kenny was the kid who was playing with matches near the drapes and then was horrified when they caught on fire with and what happened with the UCP. I think that that's very similar to what Mr. Parker and Mr. Lindsay are doing. Whether or not they have any actual awareness of what the consequences of their actions might be, I don't know. But they're not directly calling for violence. So I don't think that he should, if there's a venue that wants to host him, I don't think that I think it should be allowed to be proceeded. But I think that it's incumbent on anyone who wants to preserve the kind of society or advance the kind of a society that we say that we want to have in this province and in this country. I think it's incumbent on everybody to make sure that they're being real loud and that they're maybe not going to that venue for anything anytime. I think that's the bottom line. I mean, we have the ability. Freedom of speech is not freedom from consequences. And I think that everybody has the agency to make decisions that can, in some way, generate consequences within a legal, nonviolent framework. And I think that that's what everybody should be doing. And I think that, if we're talking about how we do things in a society. I mean, here's the thing. I've been thinking about this a lot this week, and I think that um, progress is hard. And I don't want to sound like I'm oversimplifying things, but progress requires change. You can't progress and not change. Um, if you want to have progress, you have to upset the status quo to some degree. You have to move forward, which means moving on from the place that you're at. And for people who are comfortable, who enjoy their current existence, that's a scary prospect. And I think part of the conversation, and I think this is part of the conversation that progressives are not great at, is saying, you know what, it's going to be okay if maybe we let, running through the topics of the show tonight, maybe if we let Indigenous people and First Nations people access healthcare without having to deal with institutional and real discrimination and racism, that's not going to affect your ability to access healthcare. It's just they'll be able to do it without all of the bullshit too. If we say, you know what, a kid shouldn't have to be the target of physical violence because of who they are we really having a hard time getting behind that? Like, it doesn't cost you anything if that kid doesn't get beaten within an inch of his life. You don't lose anything. But if we don't take these stands against these things, then that's exactly what happens. And we saw it even out east, where the group of kids lit a pride flag on fire and then threw the flag, the remnants of the burnt flag, and rocks at kids who were identified as members of the LGBTQ plus community of that school. It's we have to find ways to communicate with people that there are real consequences for other people. Maybe not you right now, but there are real consequences to just turning a blind eye. And I think the fundamental question that we have to ask is that who we are? And this is part of the reason why the whole rural urban divide drives me so crazy, because my childhood is all rural. And I know that for a lot of these people who are becoming a part of these movements, they're trying to take care of their community, but they haven't been educated in the way that they're trying to take care is actually causing demonstrable harm. And I think when it comes to, some of the people that are, here's the thing that I wanted to talk about. You got me going now here, man. So I'm gonna do this, then I'm gonna shut up and get out of your way so you can say the things that you want to say. But there's this misconception that exists. There was that tweet that came out from that Muslim group that David Parker amplified, where he was like, "The Muslims are with us," and that in and of itself, a lot of people, like, we looked at that and we were like, "Oh, this ain't good," because there's a whole lot of people who are going to believe that. And I've said it many times on the show, and I don't believe in monoliths. And to say that anyone, a whole group, there's no nonconformity within that group, they are a hive mind, is just disingenuous and stupid. But it turned into something really awesome, because if you go to that tweet and you take a look at the retweets, and you take a look at the number of people of the Muslim faith who said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, you are not speaking for me. I was hoping that we could have this conversation within our community, but you've clearly decided that you're going to completely misrepresent what I believe our faith to be." I'm paraphrasing here, obviously, but it was absolutely amazing. And I think that we have to have, it can't just be David Parker gets to say, "Oh, the Muslims are with us." It has to be the amplification of all of those other voices. And in order for people to realize, no, that's not what's going on here. The Muslims, David, are very much not with you. You might have a few, but there's extremists in every demographic. So is that really a win? But I think we have to be, I remember during a certain September years ago, I was terrified at what was going to happen to anyone who wasn't white, because people are short-sighted and people are myopic, and there's no question that there was a lot of hate that was directed towards anyone that wasn't white because of what happened that September morning. But there were also a whole lot of people who pulled together and said, this is not that, and you cannot speak about these people that way. And that was one thing that Canada in particular was really good at. And I just think that we need to hold on to that, and we need to keep doing it. But it's your turn, sir.
No, I'm glad you actually made a lot of points that I agree with, and the only thing I can add to that is you were mentioning progress and the topics of the show, and I thought about the Calgary Stampede and the topic of progress. How, again, going back to the whole the show where you're talking about, for us to, we always have to deal with truth first. Truth has to come first, and the fact of the matter is, right now we live in such an age of disinformation, and where not even fake news, we're just, the actual news doesn't get out there and people don't know what's happening. I talk to my friends, people who work in the oil fields, people who work, construction, who work security, stuff like that, blue collar jobs. I talk to them and they're getting the news from libs of TikTok. They're getting the news from this or that. And when we do talk about things, and I mention, hey, this is what happened in Calgary, they look at me and say, what? They go and they don't know what's going on. And so I think a lot of this comes down to simply people don't know what's going on. They don't hear what's happening because they're hearing from their, leaders. They're hearing from alternative news sources. I'm not going to name names, but you know what I'm saying. They hear all this other nonsense that just floods the airwaves, and then the real important news that people care about gets lost in the mix.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's like I said, all of those stories that we started off, we made a very deliberate choice because there was so much goodwill. I still can't wrap my head around that. Around the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. To me, it's not a celebratory thing. It's a somber opportunity for reflection. That's just me. But in the week running up to it, the fact that there were these three major stories, should have been major stories, that didn't get anywhere near the traction, that to me is, for Danielle Smith to put out a tweet today, and I realize I'm saying this from my peak middle-aged white guy privilege, so I'm just going to own that right out of the gates. But for Danielle Smith to put out a tweet today saying, oh, I'm so committed to truth and reconciliation, while the Athabasca Chippewa First Nations are saying, you screwed us. Like, that's on your watch, Danny. This is something that you can tangibly do something about, and you're choosing not to. And I don't understand. I mean, I understand why. I just don't understand how anyone can do it.
Well, it's just she's not being held to account. No one is looking at her and challenging her every day. I think that's the thing that blows my mind is that, and again, unfortunately, a lot of this is influenced by American journalism, really, to a point. That sense of being confrontational. And I'm not saying that's a good thing, but there just needs to be someone saying, why are you not telling the truth? Because there are so many things where we can say, Danielle Smith, you didn't tell us the truth on this, you didn't tell us the truth on this, but no one says it. Or if they try saying it, she's so skilled at deflection, at being able to just move right past it.
I mean, confirmation bias is a hell of a drug too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was fascinating to me when we shared the clips from the Power and Politics thing, because CBC doesn't post to the Twitter machines anymore. But it was fascinating to me how many people were like, but that's CBC. And it's like, you're not going to believe this no matter what. But those aren't the people that I'm interested in having the conversation with, because they're not going to believe you no matter what. The tragic reality is there's some folks that are just lost, and there's nothing that you can do. But what I think the space is that is important is, I saw a Twitter thread from somebody just a little while ago where they talked about the fact that they attended this event where there were a bunch of new Canadians, and they had been fed the rhetoric from the Take Back Alberta, far right, anti-LGBTQ folks, and they were scared. understandably, because they hadn't been exposed to any opposing opinions. And this person talked about how, well, they were at this event, they sat and they chatted and they had a good time, and they said, well, actually, this is how I see it. This is what I know to be true. And a lot of people were like, well, that's not unreasonable at all. I don't have a problem with that, but it's making sure that people are exposed to those viewpoints in a way that's accessible. And that's what the conversation. That's why I end the show every week with keep the conversation going, because if everybody makes the commitment to talk to 3 people in a week about, hey, do you know about why this is bullshit? Like, and there's lots of ways, like, oh, I'm in a bad mood today because this idiot's saying this thing or this person's saying this thing, and it's not reasonable. It changes people's perspective. And there are the people who are lost, who have their views made up, and there's absolutely nothing that's going to change their minds. I'm not thinking about them. But the machine that exists on the right side that is able to disseminate bullshit, like, they have the most advanced manure spreaders out there, and progressives don't have anything that comes even close to their ability. And that's where I think that's one of the things that progressives need to do a much better job of addressing. And learning how to have those conversations, because there are people who are receptive to it. There are people who want to hear the views that aren't just the hateful stuff, but they have to be exposed to it. And that's on all of us.
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on, man. We don't have anybody else in the queue. We're coming up to the 2-hour mark, so I'm going to give a quick little vamp. I want to say huge props, like especially on the YouTube chat right now. I can see that people are already working on trying to help Cassandra out. I threw a comment in there. I want to acknowledge it as well. Until we hear from Cassandra that she's got a place, please keep it up. Please keep doing the thing that you do. The community that exists around the breakdown is something that humbles me in such a big way on a regular basis, and it's just an absolute privilege to be able to be a little bit of a part of it. So I want to say thank you for everybody who's trying to help out one of our own in there. I think you guys are the reason why I keep doing this. So thank you for that. I'm gonna you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I've plugged it before. It feels gross to do it tonight, and I don't want to be gross. So we've got merch. It's on abpoly.ca. If you want to go buy some, you can. I'm not gonna do the whole pitch tonight, just because it's probably bad business sense, but I'm not a business person, so whatever. I will say, though, that we do have those 2 episodes coming up. We recorded them this weekend. We're going to be sharing them out over the next 2 weeks. The first one, again, with John Rogavine, Alberta Liberal Party leader. It's a good perspective for where the Alberta Liberals are at right now. And I think that, one of the things that we talk about on the show is the more that people are aware of what's going on, what the ideas are. And this was one thing that I really liked about my conversation with John, is that he made it very clear that if somebody picks up one of the policies that the Alberta Liberals are advocating for and they make it their own and then carry it across the finish line, cool. There's nothing wrong with that, because we got to move the ball forward, and whoever gets to take credit is kind of secondary to that. So it's a good conversation. And then in a week and a half from now, we have the conversation with, like I said, ATA president for Local 38, Stephanie Clements, and that's where we talk about all of the education stuff that's not getting talked about as much, because David Parker's doing an excellent job of sucking all the oxygen out of the room with the hate stuff. So keep an eye out for that one. I'm going to also say I want to say it's Thursday. This Thursday, there is a Teacher Appreciation Day. And I personally am of the opinion that teachers are freaking saints pretty much every day. And we should be thanking teachers and expressing our appreciation for them pretty much every day, because as you'll hear in our conversation with Stephanie, the crushing workload and situation and conditions that they're dealing with right now is absolutely brutal. So if you have the opportunity, I mean, again, do it every day, but especially on Thursday, if you have the opportunity to say some nice things about teachers, or to a specific teacher or somebody who works in the classroom, do it, because education is the potential to be the silver bullet for all of our societal issues. You're never going to have problems with people knowing more about what's going on and being able to think better. You're just never going to have problems when people are informed and critically thinking. And it's teachers that generate so much of that. So this Thursday and every day, make sure that you thank a teacher. Those episodes will be going up early for our Patreon supporters, but as always, we will be making them public. If you want to throw us the price of a fancy cup of coffee, then you can sign up to be our Patreon at patreon.com/thebreakdownab. I just am not feeling like plugging all of the things tonight is an appropriate thing to do. I would just rather that everybody try to help out Cassandra. That's what I got. So that's it for this week. I want to thank everybody who is in the chat being absolutely amazing, because you are all being absolutely amazing. I want to say thank you to everybody who is weighed in on the X spaces. A big thank you to everybody who is listening to the podcast version or watching the video version of this in any of the platforms. Leave us a like, leave us a subscribe, share it with your friends, or not. That's okay too. But like I said, when I was chatting with Chris, if everybody who listens to this episode finds 3 people to talk to about something that they're passionate about and about moving this province forward in the next week, that's how we make things better. So give that a try. We'll see you next week. As always, especially this week, take care of yourselves and each other. Above all else, keep the conversation going.